working on a 16 by 20 canvas. I've gone ahead and added black gesso to ground out all the white color. And this is going to be a night scene, of course. So I'm kind of creating a bit of a cosmos or Milky Way sort of scene. I'm adding airbrush acrylic paint and adding just some blues, some purples, a little bit of pinks, and just kind of creating some basic shapes here, as if these are gases floating out in space. And this is just most easily done with an airbrush, and I enjoy using airbrushes. It's really hard to get these types of effects without them. So now I'm just using some real thin paint here. I'm using a little bit of like a pale blue, and I'm just flicking on some just some little splatters of paint. These will represent the stars, and just a quick easy way of doing that. And I'm going to use this lid to kind of help me form the shape of the moon. I like to use different tools when possible, just to make my life a little bit easier. So this is a commission painting, and I was sent several reference photos from the client, one being this blood red moon that they sent on their phone. So I'm just trying to simulate something very similar to this image, and I've started with mixing my my red and a little bit of sap green, and those two colors complement each other, and it will help to kind of dull out that color. I'm adding a little bit more red than green because I do want to still kind of keep it within those reddish tones. And I'm going back to that same mixture and just changing the value a little bit by adding a little bit of titanium white, and continue to kind of just work on this moon. And it's really just using that same green-red mixture and just changing the values, adding a little bit more purple into the mixture to create sort of these craters that I'm seeing from the image here, and just kind of scumble those on all throughout, and just try to get as close of an approximation to that picture as I can. Now this is going to get kind of covered by our dragon and our sorceress a little bit, but I just want to get this all painted in now because I'm not exactly sure where the dragon's going to be covering. So it's just easiest to get this all laid in right now. I'm not a big fan of having to work around objects when I can help it. I kind of create a little bit of a glow here with my airbrush, and I've mixed together a very pale red, almost a pink color, with my titanium white and my red airbrush acrylic paint, and that'll kind of create that nice little glow effect that I'm sort of seeing here in the reference photo. And again, I'm laying in all acrylic to start with. I will add oil a little bit later in the painting, but right now this is all being done in acrylic. Alright, so we're going to kind of create some choppy waves here, and I've mixed a nice kind of a darkish charcoal gray color that I'm kind of fading into more of a midnight black as I get closer to the forefront of the painting. But this being a commission painting, there were several elements that needed to be included. Needed to have the moon, an ocean, and a nice dark rock, as well as our blood moon dragon and our sorceress. So had some freedoms here on how I wanted to put this together, but there was quite a bit of detail given by the client as to what they were kind of looking for. And then from that point on, I can just use my artistic license, and I can kind of put this together as I wish. So now I'm kind of just adding a little bit more detail into the water now, and a few little choppy waves and some ripples. Not going to be a lot of detail on the water. The goal here was that I wanted this to be a night scene. I wanted it to be casting some of that pale reddish moon color, kind of reflecting a little bit in the water, casting some light onto the rock, and of course onto the dragon, and a little bit on our sorceress. But it's just good to try to get this all kind of worked in here, and then I'll just I'll overlay the dragon here a little bit later, and it'll sort of be in the middle of the painting. So right now it's just good to just lay this in mostly to completion, and then I'll just paint right on top of that, so that once again I'm not having to work around objects, which is just my preference. I know a lot of artists do like that. All right, so we're kind of creating a little bit more light on the shadows. This is going to have a lot of nice contrast in the painting between our lights and our darks. But it's what made the painting quite enjoyable. But still trying to keep that basic theme of this being quite a lot of kind of a nighttime scene here. So just kind of creating a little bit of the eye of the wave here, getting a little bit of translucence through the wave, and I'm just dry brush blending that on. It's important to keep in mind, if you're not familiar with acrylics, that acrylics do dry very quickly, and they also dull when you apply them. You start with them being pretty creamy and smooth because of the water, but once the water evaporates, they will dull a few shades darker. So in order to prevent that, you just need to add several layers on top, or just very thick paint. So because it dries so quickly, you don't have a lot of blending time, so a lot of what I do with acrylic is dry brush blend and kind of just soften as I go. All right, so I'm going to add a nice large wave that's kind of breaking against the bank of this large stone here, and just kind of bringing again that green red mixture here, and keeping it nice and dark, and then changing my value slightly by adding titanium white and a little bit of orange, and kind of creating some movement and some choppiness and foam to this breaking wave. I'm going to try to explain the colors that I'm using the best I can here as we move along. But really, most of the kind of rusty red color is really just achieved by using either sap green and red, and sometimes a little bit of purple if I need to darken it up a little bit more. So I've now just come through and sketched on with my charcoal pencil our dragon, kind of basically where I think I wanted it to be, and I wanted to bring that in because I kind of wanted an idea about exactly where it's going to live, so I can kind of work around it just a little bit more. Now I'm just using my tree and texture brush, and I'm stippling on some gray. I've mixed my gray with burnt umber and ultramarine blue. And then as I start to lighten that up, I just add some titanium white to change the value a little bit lighter. And I just want to create a lot of texture, a lot of pores, a lot of cracks and divots in this rock here, and just have a lot of nice detail. And I can achieve that really nicely by using the tree and texture brush, which is just a very awesome brush, and I use it quite a bit. You don't want a lot of paint on your brush. You don't want it to be very wet either. It's going to have to be fairly creamy, be pretty conservative on how much you put on there, and then you can just dot that on, stipple that on. I'm bringing back some reds now, as if I can have that moonlight kind of casting a little bit of some of that red glow. and mostly keeping it kind of in the center of the painting. The important thing is to really try to draw the eye kind of toward the center of the painting, which is our focal point. So I'm just kind of bouncing back and forth here now and trying to lighten certain areas up, and now I'm coming back through here with my small round brush and just kind of squaring things off a little bit and improving my lines and adding some extra little detail here, a few more different types of lines that I think will add nicely to some of the realism on the stone. And then I'm going back with my pure black now, and I'm just adding some cracks now throughout this large boulder. And I wanted to bring some of these forefront boulders in here as well, so I've drawn those in, and then I can stipple on some of that color. It's really just kind of a repetitious thing on what you already saw me do here. But wanted to get kind of a general idea where that's going to be, and of course I want it to kind of be layered on top of our dragon as if to push the dragon a little bit further back into the painting. And these fantasy style paintings are a lot of fun to do. I don't do an enormous amount of fantasy paintings, but I do enjoy them from time to time to change things up. And they're fun challenges, and I encourage you to give them a try. Don't get stuck just doing one thing. Don't be just a nature guy or a tree guy or a landscape guy. Really try to have the courage to broaden your abilities and trying different things. Try portrait work and try landscapes, try seascapes, try fantasy art. I encourage trying to do everything. I get bored really easily, so it's just nice to go ahead and change the monotony just a little bit. So adding a little bit more cracks here, and you'll see me coming in and out with my acrylic pen. Excuse me. The acrylic pen is really nice. It's acrylic paint, but it comes out in a pen, and it makes some nice straight lines, which I find real handy sometimes, especially with really intense detail. All right, so I'm just using pure black here now just to silhouette our dragon, and then once that dries, I like to redraw back in a little bit more detail into the face and what I'm kind of working on here. So I've gone into our gray mixture, blue, umber, and a little bit of a dioxazine purple, and that's what's kind of achieving that color. This is going to be a black dragon, but in order to really show some separation in the scales and show a little bit of detail here, I'm going to have to kind of rely on that grayish purple color. And then I can go back through here and I can sort of change up our value system just a little bit and add some highlights here. And I'll come through here and kind of play with this a little bit, and I'm kind of thinking about where the light is casting. It's of course casting from behind the images here, and I'm trying to keep that in mind. So some of this is going to have some silver lining to it and some backlit features to it as I move along here. Now I'm still using that same purple-gray mixture. I'm adding a little bit more titanium white, and that's what's lightening my value here. And that way I can kind of jump between mid-tones and dark tones as well as my light tones. So I'm just kind of scumbling on here a little bit of color. And this is again a dry brush blending technique that is pretty customary for me when I'm using acrylic paint. So this is my acrylic pen. Started by just sort of drawing in some scales, and a little bit later on in the painting I changed my scales. Actually, I felt like they were just too tiny and they were too close together, and it almost really just grayed out my dragon, and all that detail started to kind of fade away because they were too tiny. So I went back a little bit later and I adjusted the scales and made a lot of different variations, large scales, small scales. So that will be something I'll do a little bit later. Right now I'm just kind of playing with things because I don't really have a solid idea about the full direction I'm taking here, and sometimes I do that. Sometimes my paintings are really well thought out and I kind of have an idea about exactly what I want to do. Other times I just allow creativity to happen, and I let it happen in real time as I'm working. And the nice thing about painting with oils or acrylics is you have the luxury of changing things if you don't like what you did. And so those scales were definitely something I wasn't a huge fan of, and wanted to rework that again. So I'll kind of play with this dragon a little bit. And I also was kind of struggling to think how I wanted to do his neck and his chest, and eventually just knew that I wanted to have some nice large armor plating here, which is what I was kind of drawing in here now. So I'm just kind of working in little sections, and I find it easiest to kind of work this way as I go. And it's important as I work on these wings that I had some nice translucence through the skin membrane on these wings here, and that's kind of what I'll be playing with and working on as well. So I'm kind of just going back here, and I'm redrawing these scales, but once again I'm not overly satisfied with this, and so I'll change it again. But that pen is really awesome. It's so much easier than going and using a rigger brush or a script liner brush. It can be done that way, but you're constantly going back to your palette. You're constantly picking up more color and coming back, and I was really happy to stumble upon those acrylic pens. So I'm coming back and kind of changing up my armor plating. Once again, I wasn't overly happy, and I thought it'd be nice to go ahead and stipple on some texture first, and then I can kind of redraw back in all the armor plating here on his chest. So you're just kind of observing me just trying different things and seeing what I feel like might work or might not work, and just adjusting accordingly. With so much detail on this dragon, using this acrylic pen was certainly a lifesaver. I really enjoy a lot of detail in my paintings, and I just think it kind of adds a little bit something different and extra to the work. But that's just kind of how I like to do it myself. All right, so I'm going to continue here, bringing in the arms and now kind of going into the body of our dragon. Starting off here in black, midnight black, and then just overlaying my purples and grays on top of that. For me, is one of my preferred methods of doing this. I just wanted to kind of lay in our dragon here first, and then of course our sorceress is going to be standing right in front of him. So I had a basic idea where the sorceress is going to be. I wasn't totally sure exactly how much smaller I wanted to make her in comparison to the dragon, though I knew she had to be a whole lot smaller to give him a sense of being this large beast. But right now it's just easiest to just paint him all in, and then once again I can just lay her on top of the dragon and not having to necessarily work around quite as much. I wanted to get a little bit of reflected light here now just by dry brushing on some of our purple grays, and I really wanted to get that a little bit lighter because in order to be able to see the scales on top of that really dark black underpainting, it's pretty important that you really lighten up quite a bit the body of this dragon. And once again, my scales are just too small, and they don't look too bad up close, but as you kind of step away from the canvas a little bit, it almost disappears. So I'll go back and change that here later. But wanted to get the large wing here kind of worked in and figure out where that was going to live. And I can always go back and then adjust things here a little bit later. So it was a fun project, and excuse me. But you know, as you continue to paint on top of objects in the background, you may have to go through a few different times with a few different layers in order to get those objects covered up completely. Now I'm coming back and just using some of those reds and oranges to really just dry brush on some of our translucents, as if that moonlight is sort of bleeding through his wings a little bit. And I'll continue to play with that a little bit here and try to get the right kind of the right glow that I'm looking for here in these wings. Bring in a few little veins here just to add some little extra little bits of interest to the painting. I use a lot of small brushes, as you can tell. I usually will use a bit larger brush to kind of block in a larger surface area, but for the most part I do enjoy using those smaller brushes to get the detail and the control that I'm looking for. So I'm just kind of lightening his body once again with our purplish gray mixture, and making sure that you can really see those scales come through. I still wanted it to be a black dragon, but you're going to still have to just add some color in those gray tones in order to achieve that level of detail and three-dimensionality a little bit. Now, a lot of this leg and this arm is going to get covered up by our Sorceress, but again, I wasn't overly certain where exactly she was going to live, so I just felt it was good to get it all worked in now, and then I can just cover up what I need to cover up later on. So I keep adding these little scales here, and I keep stepping back thinking, well, that's not quite right. I'm going to change that again, and I'll get that changed here pretty soon. But just kind of tweaking and adding some highlights to help with the form and the shape the best I can. Just kind of bouncing back and forth between my lights and my darks, and just trying to see what's going to work and what's not. I'm adding a little bit more of our silver lining around our dragon so I can really kind of create a little bit of depth and separation here. Now I've gone back and changed those scales. I didn't actually show it on the video, but you can see how they're a lot larger now, and they're all different shapes and sizes, and I was much happier with that version, which was my third or fourth try on that actually. I kept having to go back and cover it up and just figure out what was going to work, and so I was a lot happier with that. But really just kind of gives it that real reptilian sort of look about it, which was kind of what I wanted to achieve. And so I was just a lot happier that way. All right, so I can start working on this tail here now. And I've also drawn in our Sorceress. I've kind of sketched her in the middle, and I figured out kind of how tall I wanted her to be and how much space she was going to be covering up here, just to have a general idea. As I work on this tail here, I've gone through and stippled on some light gray tones with our tree and texture brush, and now I'm kind of just using that black acrylic pen, add a little bit more detail. I almost kind of wanted my tail to almost look like a crocodile tail. I thought that would be kind of a neat thing to do, a little bit unique from a lot of dragon tails, but I thought that would really kind of add some interest and some extra detail to our dragon. So have all those little armor plating and some of that separation, and then of course come back through and add the rest of the scales in. So as I said, this can all be done with a small script liner brush. You're just gonna be working a lot harder to achieve it, I think. Alright, so I'm airbrushing on a little bit of blue because I wanted to have our Sorceress have some balls of fire, as if she's kind of just conjuring up a spell, and that way we know that she's this powerful sorceress. And so this was another request made by the client on this painting, was to have this kind of pretty, sexy sort of sorceress, as if she's all powerful and she's controlling this dragon. And so it was a fun challenge bringing this in and just kind of blocking her in initially now, and kind of figuring out where her dress is going to be, where you know, how low it's going to go, and I can kind of just gauge and figure out a lot of how I wanted to put this together a little bit. I'm using I've mixed a light blue gray color using umber and ultramarine blue and some white to achieve that bluish gray color here, and that's how I'm kind of wanting her to have a black dress on. So just kind of showing some basic folds in the dress, and kind of provide that illusion a little bit. Now I've switched over to oil paints at this time. This starting into her face and her skin tones, the flesh tones. I just wanted to use oil paint to achieve that. I can get some nice shading and blending, a little bit longer blending time this way. So I've switched my palette over now, and I'm kind of creating a dark flesh tone here. I've really kind of using a couple colors. I'm using umber, I'm using ultramarine blue, using some phthalo red, little phthalo yellow, and just a little bit of titanium white, but mostly staying in the umbers, the blues, and the reds. I really wanted to keep her fairly shadowed, and kind of dark and mystical, I suppose you could say. And then just kind of bringing some highlight into her hair here a little bit, and just taking that same gray color and changing the value by adding some titanium white. I'm just kind of jumping back and forth with that. So still just kind of working this out, bringing in her shoulders, bringing in her upper chest region, and just kind of show that she's not wearing a lot of clothing. Again, she needed to kind of be this real, provocative, sexy sort of a sorceress, per the instructions I was given. So kind of painting a little bit of cleavage here, and just kind of add a little bit of interest here to to our Sorceress. And you really just kind of want to allow the underpainting to really work for you here. I think you can really just make your life a lot easier by really availing on a lot of that underpainting to assist and using some of your negative space. And you don't need to nearly put as much detail at that point in time. It'll kind of do it for itself. I apologize, I've kind of gone off camera here for a second. I'll get this kind of positioned correctly here in a moment. I'm kind of working her lower leg region now, and I failed to get my camera positioned appropriately. But it's really kind of just a little bit of the same thing that I've already shown here, which is kind of repetitious. But painted the rest of her skin tones here into her legs, and wanted a little bit of that flesh to kind of be showing, as if she's kind of got this almost like draping her dress a little bit here, and I'm just kind of going through and kind of tweaking here and there, and I'm nearly finished now. I appreciate you tuning in. I hope this has been a helpful painting. It was a lot of fun. I encourage you to please subscribe to my YouTube channel and catch some future tutorial videos and maybe some other ones you've not seen yet. So thanks so much for tuning in. Until next time, we'll come back with something else fun and exciting to share. Happy painting. Thanks a lot. Bye.